Ladies and gentlemen, last week we paraded around that old custom violin used for unholy spirits like the vine like a proud stage parent. Today we're actually going to use our brain cells, so fetch your thinking caps and those pretentious art appreciation berets you keep for Galleria openings. We are going to do some interpreting. As it turns out, our custom violin features a painting by an artist named Kim Noble. I'll be honest, I chose the piece simply because it vibed with me before knowing anything about her. But, as it turns out, my intuition was eerily on point, as her backstory fits this record's philosophy better than a custom-tailored straitjacket. Whether you're a believer or a cynic, the Saga of Kim Noble makes a hell of a pitch. A British artist born in 1960, Noble is the poster child for Dissociative Identity Disorder, a diagnosis she received in 1995, after years of supposedly being misunderstood by the medical establishment. The narrative claims her psyche shattered into over 20 distinct personalities, to all of extreme childhood trauma experienced between the ages of 1 and 3. In 2004, Noble took up painting as therapy, and in a stroke of marketing genius, it turned out that 14 of her personalities, or alters as she calls them, were conveniently gifted artists. Each one boasts a distinctive style and medium, effectively turning a single human into a one-woman art collective. Her meticulously created brand was solidified in her 2011 autobiography, All of Me, which tracks her transformation from a fractured victim to a celebrated figure and the first artist in residence at the Springfield University Hospital. It's a compelling arc, though the sheer marketability of it all makes my spidey sense tingle. Her work became a staple for outlets like Vice, Oprah, and 60 Minutes, largely fueled by an author named Ria Brett. Brett's rather graphic depiction of unmentionables provided the exact kind of edgy content that thrives in the darker corners of the internet hate machine. Here is a sample. Keep in mind that this video isn't specifically about Kim Noble, though her backstory is worth mentioning, especially regarding the vampiric energies associated with these kinds of trafficking operations at work here. However, today we tap into a much more obscure corner of her mind. The work on the violin comes from an author known simply as Key. Key creates schematic paintings that look like diagrams and are usually restricted to a color palette of black, white, and gold, and are heavy on the symbolism side. Today we are focusing on such a keen painting from 2006, simply entitled It Happens. Stripping away the elaborate lore, how does the work truly interface with unholy spirits like divine? Let's find out. So ladies and gentlemen, what are we looking at here? Essentially, it's a Where's Waldo for the clinically existential. Right in the middle we have a lonely stick figure standing under a literal rain of arrows, trapped in a nested series of rectangles. These concentric borders create a tunnel effect, providing an illusion of depth. The second layer is purely linguistic. If you squint hard enough, you'll find uplifting readings like help, blood, death, and why. Moving on to the third rectangle from the center, the imagery shifts. This layer features trees, houses, wells, what happens to be lightning, ships, and complex grids, with a few stick figures in various stages of distress thrown in for good measure. Layer 4 maintains the stick figure violence but pivots to a nature motif, a hostile landscape of snakes, fire, earth, rain, and snow, all seemingly conspiring to torment the figures. The fifth layer amps up the conspiracy vibe, including a repeating sequence of zodiac signs tethered to the layers below by thin lines, as if suggesting that the planets themselves are in on it. Finally, and most intriguingly, the outermost layer returns to the theme of stick figure violence, ranking it even above the zodiac. This layer is tethered to the signs below by a series of literal arrows, making the hierarchy impossible to miss. So now let's get into the cringy high school art interpretation part. To me, this painting can be interpreted as a spell or curse that illustrates the alchemy of personhood. Viewed this way, being a person isn't the natural state. The way I see it, those central errors create a sense of pressurization, effectively pinning down raw consciousness. It suggests that to remain a person at all, you must be kept under constant crushing pressure. The moment that pressure lets up, the figure might simply dissolve back into the black void of pure unformed consciousness. This is reinforced by the second layer, a linguistic cage, if you will, where words like death and blood encircle the center to force that infinite point to identify with a mortal body, tricking it into fearing its own end. The third layer represents the domestic world, though it's far from a sanctuary. The artwork maps out the fundamental structures of life, shelter, cities, and basic human interactions. But the elements of abuse permeate these safe spaces. This suggests that even our most basic institutions work to maintain that internal pressure. The very concept of home or community are weaponized to prevent the consciousness from finding an exit. The next layer takes this imprisonment a step further by weaponizing the natural world. In this light, the very fabric of reality is rigged. The elements aren't just background noise, they're actively participating in the restriction of the self. There is no escape to nature, because the natural world is just another layer of the trap, designed from the ground up to keep the consciousness pinned in place. The fifth layer introduces the zodiac as acting as a cosmic character sheet that imposes traits and archetypes on the consciousness before it even has the chance to choose who it is. It feels like the pre-written script of a play you have been forced to act in without ever meeting the director. What's truly cynical is the implication that even the heavens are in on it. By tethering these celestial signs to the layers of trauma below, the artwork suggests that the very alignment of the planets is part of the conspiracy. In this view, identity is not just a social construct, it is a cosmic trap. Ultimately, the painting depicts the compression of the I am. A pure, formless state of being is systematically crushed until it hardens into the rigid definitions of I am a name, I am a job, and I am afraid. The brilliance, or perhaps the real cruelty of this work, lies in the implied feedback loop created by the recurring arrows in the innermost and outermost layers. It suggests a self-sustaining cycle. The more you are hurt, the more you retreat into your identity to protect yourself. But the more identity you have, the more surface area you have to be hurt. To the astute listener or anyone who spends more than 20 minutes in a dark room with a philosophy degree, this is hardly a plot twist. At its core, this painting is a high-concept lament of the prison world theory that Gnostics have been moaning about since the 2nd century. For the uninitiated, Gnosticism is essentially the original "we live in a simulation" meme. It proposes that the material world is a cosmic dumpster fire, the Knoma or void, constructed by a junior-varsity deity known as the Demiurge, or various other names. Depending on which ancient scroll you trust, this lesser god is either a well-meaning incompetent, just some guy overwhelmed by the complexity of the world machine, or a straight-up sadist. Congratulations, you have now achieved Gnosis. You are officially enlightened. Your reward? You get to despise the physical world as a sophisticated prison system and learn how to shun your own flesh and ego. It's the ultimate "I'm not even supposed to be here today" theology. But since we're already this deep down in the rabbit hole, let's push past the entry-level enlightenment and see what actually happens after Gnosis. Specifically when you take this Gnostic prison world theory and add theological monism to the mix. Let's start with Alan Watts' concept of the cosmic egg, or the divine game of hide and seek, which is a modern Western synthesis of old Eastern ideas. Watts argues that if there were really an all-powerful, all-knowing God who had the power to dream any dream he wanted, he would eventually dream a life that felt completely real, including the risk of failure and the fear of death. Why? Because an eternal state of pure, undifferentiated bliss would eventually become monotonous. He invents a game where he cracks his own cosmic egg, representing God's totality, and splatters himself into billions of tiny, fragile individuals. Everything from the tree in your yard to the debt on your credit card is God in a very convincing mustache, operating under his own divine permit to not be God for a while. To truly happen, the infinite must experience the finite. To truly know, God must pretend to forget. Remember, this is based on monism, so there's no creation separate from the creator. There's only God doing everything, being everyone, and most importantly, giving himself the permission to forget the whole thing just to see if he can survive the commute on a Monday morning. So the pressurization you see in the painting, that's just the big guy tightening the screws on his own skull to make the mask of being a person feel sufficiently heavy. He creates the trap of existence, the ego, the fear of death, and the sheer absurdity of taxes as a spell he casts on himself. It's a cosmic method acting session, where the director, the actor, and the guy selling overpriced popcorn are all the same being. The whole curse of being a person is just God winning a bet against himself. He's managed to make his own persona so convincing that he's actually terrified of his own stage props. So waking up isn't actually about escaping the trap, it's the hilarious realization that the puppet master has been pulling his own string the entire time. And surprise, you're the one holding the controller. Now let's dive deeper to see where Watts got his ideas from. In Advaita Vedanta, an ancient Indian school of non-dual philosophy, the only reality is the Brahman, the infinite, unchanging, and singular Godhead. In the 8th century, the philosopher Adi Shankara argues that what we call a person is actually a profound case of mistaken identity. The self isn't actually a person at all. It's a fragment of the infinite Godhead having a very convincing hallucination. Shankara describes our true nature as Satchit Ananda, a fancy way of saying you are pure existence, consciousness, and bliss, even though you are currently too distracted by your credit card debt to notice. Think of the self as a movie screen. The screen doesn't actually get soaked when the film shows a monsoon, and it doesn't suffer third-degree burns when there's a desert scene. You are the screen, but you spend the whole life screaming because you think you're the character drowning in the third act. The trap, squashing you into a finite shape, is what Shankara calls avidya, or the kind of ignorance that makes you do stupid things, like assuming the qualities of a dying, hungry body actually belong to an eternal soul. This pressurization is achieved through a series of 5 divine onion layers, called koshas, which act as a cosmic buffer between you and the truth. These include your physical body, your meat suit, your breath and vital energy, your fickle mind and emotions, your ego-driven intellect, and the subtle layer of bliss that you feel when you enjoy things, which is still just a very fancy gold-plated cage. You get so tangled up in these sheets that you start saying, I am tired, instead of saying, this body is tired. To Shankara, that is about as logical as a car window claiming that it has a flat tire. So how do you live once you realize you're just a fragment of an all-powerful God playing a very convincing role as a stressed-out office worker? Shankara urges you to change your perspective while you are still in the trap. His jailbreak is a mental exercise called neti, which roughly translates to not this, not that. To live correctly, you must constantly practice discrimination. When you experience a thought or an emotion, you mentally acknowledge, I am the one observing this thought, therefore I am not the thought. Let's practice. I have a body, but I'm not the body. I have feelings, but I am not the feelings. By stripping away what you aren't, you eventually fall back into what you are. You don't have to quit your job and move to a cave. You simply keep a divine secret in the back of your head while playing the person role with 100% effort. You live with detachment, acting your heart out on the stage of life while knowing full well that you're going out for drinks with the rest of the cast once the curtain falls. The goal is to become someone who is liberated while alive. You're still in the body, you're still inside of the egg, but you finally crack the code. Now this is all fine and dandy, you might say, but have you seen all the stick figure abuse in this painting? How is it at all tolerable if you live in a reality that is explicitly evil? To answer this, we have to examine the concept of Wadat al-Wujud, or the unity of being, as taught by the great master of Sufi mysticism, Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi didn't see the world as a mistake or a hollow hallucination. He saw it as a divine necessity. He famously quotes a hadith in which God reveals, I was a hidden treasure, and I love to be known, so I created the creation that I might be known. So what is there to know about God? In Sufi theology, God has 99 names or attributes, and they aren't all cuddly. There are names of beauty, like the merciful, the loving, but there are also names of majesty and rigor, like the abaser, the slayer, the inflictor of harm. For God to be truly the all, he must manifest in all his attributes. If there were no evil or suffering, the names the healer and the forgiver could never be expressed. God is like a cosmic novelist who is so obsessed with his own range that he writes the most unhinged supervillains just to prove that he can. An evil reality is a hall of mirrors where God plays both the victim and the executioner to experience the full spectrum of possibility. It's the ultimate method acting gone wrong, or right, depending on how much God wanted to suffer that day. This leads us to the concept of the sweetness of torment. This is Ibn Arabi's most controversial take. He suggests that even in hell, the inhabitants eventually find a form of sweetness in their state, because they realize it is still a manifestation of God. From the perspective of the Absolute, the play must have a tragedy to be a complete work of art. For example, if you find yourself unjustly tortured in a dungeon, even Arabi's framework suggests a transformation of the experience through witnessing, servitude, and the oneness of the actor. In that dungeon, your job as a point of consciousness is to witness the hidden treasures of God in their most constricted, agonizing form. In Advaita, you might say, I'm not this body. In Sufism, you say, this body is currently the site of a divine manifestation. You become the perfect human by remaining present in the hellscape. By staying conscious and submitting to the reality of the moment, you fulfill the purpose of the mirror. In that dungeon, you are the point of consciousness where the infinite experiences the absolute minimum of human dignity. Crucially, submission in this context doesn't mean doing nothing. If everything is God, then your impulse to resist, your will to survive, and your scream for justice are also God. Ibn Arabi proposes acting according to the command of the moment. If the moment demands patience, you are patient. If the moment offers a chance for jailbreak, you take it. Both are permissions of God. The Sufi mystics often spoke about finding a garden in the midst of a fire. If you truly believe that the dungeon and its demons are also made of God, the dungeon loses its power to destroy your essence. It doesn't make the whip hurt any less, but it stops the evil from being meaningless. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all the solace I can provide on this, and it is what it is. As always, all the authors I have mentioned in the video are long dead, and according to the prison world, do not deserve any rights. Which means that you can download all of their writings for free. Check the description below. And if you want a definitive soundtrack to your stay in the dungeon, consider Unholy Spirits Light the Vine on Bandcamp. And for those of you who wish to descend even deeper into the void, consider joining our inner circle. A $3 monthly subscription ensures that the tea stays hot, the whip stays whippy, and the lore continues to flow. It is the most direct way to support the art before the ferryman comes for his cut. This Friday, April the 3rd, is another Bandcamp Friday, the one day of the month where you can laugh as a meaningful patron of the arts. Bandcamp is waiving its revenue share, which means 100% of your hard-earned cash goes directly into fueling the delusions of greedy artists everywhere. Whether you're actually after a digital album or you're just desperately trying to fill that carnivorous, aching consumerist void, go ahead, buy a tape you'll never play or a shirt that you only wear once. Your financial sacrifice keeps our pressurization high and our vision uncompromising. So do the dance, monkey. Share, like, subscribe, never leave the internet, obey, buy, consume, and give us your money. Now. May the volcano gods be with you.